Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast that talks about what it really takes to be healthy and stay healthy in this modern, fast paced world. I'm Tiffany Simms, your burnout recovery expert and holistic wellness coach. And today I'm here with Jenn Watts. Jenn, tell the people who you are and where you're from. Like, what makes you you?
Oh boy, that's a good question. What makes me me? Well, first of all, where I'm from, I'm actually from like the Vancouver area. I'm Canadian. I'm up in BC in Canada, but I live on Vancouver Island. Yeah,
That's cool. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's where I am. And what makes me me? Yeah, I'm like a CPA turned life and nutrition coach, and I have
Oh,
ADHD. I'm like a late diagnosed, you like typically late diagnosed woman. Um, yeah, and that's what I do now is that I've totally pivoted from accounting into coaching other women with ADHD who are working on weight loss.
I
Yeah.
love that so much. There's a
Mhm.
few things that I love right now. One, before you and I hopped on to record this, I was feeling a little frazzled because I had just enough time to go for a run, but not enough time to like get myself together for us to like do this podcast episode. And I had that like pause moment where I almost didn't go for a run. And then I was like, no, absolutely not. That's not what this show is about. This show is about doing what you have to do to keep your body at its best. And for me, that was taking time for my physical to like exercise my physical body today. And so if you're watching on YouTube, like I've got puppy ears in my hair right now because I try to take my ponytail down. Like I've got sweaty clothes on, my makeup isn't off. Like this is what it really looks like to do
Mhm.
it all and have it all is the ebb and flow of making it work and not carrying the baggage around with it. And so,
Yeah,
Jenn,
yeah.
thanks for loving me. Now
And by the way,
you
too, I saw you live on Instagram after your run. And so I want to talk about that later too.
okay. My brain was not working. Like the topic was there, and then I was just so out of breath that like I wasn't functioning. And I was like, this is complete garbage. So
That's like me too. I do the same thing. I'm like out for a walk and I'm like, I'll have a great idea. And I start talking and I'm like, I don't think people really want to listen to me like panting as trying to talk about stuff. So
yeah, I lost my breath because I my heart rate was still so high. And so
yeah.
if you're new to the show, welcome. This is what Two Humans Talking is all about. It is me bringing on other women and having real life conversations. Like Jen and I went to a coffee shop, or I had her over to the house and we were sitting on the couch, drinking whatever was in our cup and just talking about real life. And so I love, Jen, that you shared that with people about like just who you are. Like if we had just met, those are the kind of things that are conversation starters. And so everyone welcome Jen to the show. Hi, Jen.
Thank you. I feel like that's such a warm welcome.
So did you know you had ADHD when you were working full time as a CPA?
I had no idea. And now I know so many women will relate to this, but looking back, I'm like, oh my God, so many things make sense. And I also look back and I think, like, how on earth did I do that? Like, how did I make it through that and survive? Like, I kind of wasn't surviving. Like, I was coping and like so stressed out, so anxious, like barely making it through the day, like masking all the time.
Isn't that what
Um,
surviving is? Coping,
yeah,
doing what you
yeah.
need to do to get by. Like that's
Mhm.
survival.
Yeah, for sure. And it was survival, but I guess in the sense that like I didn't know that other people weren't functioning the way that I was functioning. Like I was like, oh gosh, like I had such social anxiety. I always thought people didn't like me. I always thought I was going to get fired, which is ridiculous because I was an amazing employee, such a hard worker, and yet just constantly felt like I wasn't enough. I wasn't doing things properly. I was so disorganized and like trying to like make up for it in different ways and just
So
was a
I have a real
mess.
question.
Yeah.
Are those side effects or symptoms of ADHD, or
Mhm.
is that a, what's the word that I want to use? Or are those just symptoms of someone who wants to be seen and valued and isn't getting the feedback they need to know that they are on the right path?
I think it can be either or because like well I think when it comes to the ADHD stuff, and this is why I think so much these days people are like, well, doesn't everybody have a little bit of that? Because some of the things that the ways that it shows up for people, a lot of people do experience that, but it is like like when there's so much of it and it's constant for you, that's different, right? But a lot of those things for sure are just like the seeking of validation, the insecurity, the like the confidence issues. Well, those can be for many different reasons, right? And they can be, yeah, like I mean, people can just be looking for that kind of stuff for any reason. But it was just pervasive, and it was like I was barely functioning. Yeah, like
So,
it got to the point where I was like, I had like rashes on my skin. I was like, yeah,
ugh.
I know it was crazy. I was like not sleeping properly, like just so overworked. And that was one of my like quote unquote coping mechanisms was like the overworking. Like I was so immersed in work, and even though it was like so difficult for me because I was like I didn't want to deal with the rest of my life and like the chaos that was going on inside my head. But yeah, it was tough.
I don't know which topic I want to go to next because I was like thinking about something, which is an ADHD thing. It's
Yeah.
very hard for me to always be present because I'm trying not to forget the thing that I wanted to share, but I don't want to cut you off because that's considered rude.
You're told yes. Don't you think that's one of those like paradox? I never know if paradox is the right word, but the thing where you're like, I need to interrupt you because I want to affirm you and I don't want to forget what I was going to say, but
And I want to
also
connect with you.
yes. And like you share your own story because you want to like be like, I get it, I understand. But then other people are like, why are you making it about you? Like that's not
It's
what
like, I'm not
we're doing.
making it about me. I'm trying to make this about us. Like,
Yes.
I'm trying to be a part of the conversation, not just focus
Connecting.
on it. And so I have very strong feelings about the neurotypical neurospicy thing because I
Yeah.
truly believe, like, what makes something typical? What makes something
Mm,
divergent? What makes something different?
yeah.
And who says that the way that the neurotypical people, who says that's normal?
Yes. You know what? I heard, oh my gosh, I wish I could remember who it was. I heard somebody talking about this the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a good way to explain it. They were saying kind of along the same lines of what you were saying. Like, we're like people who are considered neurodivergent, like our brains, like we are very valued in society, especially if you look back to like hunter gatherer days or whatever. Like society doesn't function unless people's brains work differently and people have different skills and different attributes and different like strengths and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that oh my gosh, that's kind of blowing my mind because that's such a good point. Like, why is it seen that this is typical and we are not typical when really it's just a
And then
variation
I feel like
how
if
we
you look at the
operate?
balance of like where it is, it's probably even, or maybe even the ADHD world is higher. So then that would make the ADHDers typical and everyone
Mm-hmm.
else a butthead. No, I'm kidding. I
Well,
think
I think
about
we just solved it. So yeah.
I think about that though in the context of like when you're having conversations with people and they feel like in those moments when you're trying to connect, you're trying to be a part of the story, connect with the person telling the story, make them not feel alone and valued, which is usually what's happening when someone is quote unquote cool whipping. It's like just that connection piece is why are you so self-centered and self-righteous that you can't share a conversation with someone? That's what comes up for
Yeah,
me.
that's a very good way to look at it.
Like if someone has to sit there with their mouth shut and just listen to you preach at them without being able to interject, without being able to share their inputs, then is that really a conversation?
It's not. And I'm like bored just thinking about that. Like if I have
Do
to
you know what I
just sit
mean?
there and yeah, I totally do. And if you're just sitting there being talked at, not talked with, like I go offline real quick.
Yeah.
And I would never want somebody to feel like that talking to me. I don't
And
know.
that dynamic, especially for people with ADHD, it causes us to like be hypersensitive and hyper reactive because we're constantly adjusting for situations, trying not to offend people. And so our anxiety goes through the roof. And for a lot of us, that leads to eating as a way to cope
Mm-hmm.
with all of that stored up energy
Yeah.
and to soothe ourselves as a way to like
Yes.
re regulate the body.
100%, 100%. And yes, like that is why so much of it too will be like I find for myself, from my own experience and the people that I work with or talk to, that so much of it happens in the evening because we have this so much mental energy that goes into just surviving the day, kind of. It's the same with everybody else. I mean, life is hard. Everybody needs mental energy to get through things, but we're already starting at a deficit when it comes to like the dopamine and all of that kind of stuff. And then you have all that extra exertion, like you just talked about. And so you're kind of tapped out before the day is even half done, and you're so overwhelmed. You're in decision fatigue, all of this stuff, and you haven't eaten properly throughout the day because you're not paying attention. You're not listening to your body. You're getting into hyper focus, and then the evening rolls around, and you're just like going to town in the pantry, right?
Yeah.
Because you're coping. You're also like undernourished and famished, and then your brain just wants glucose and all of this stuff. All of these things happening, and that's where it all goes to down. I guess you could say downhill, but you're just dealing with life the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So it makes
And I can't
sense.
speak for men, but I know for women, especially ADHDers who are trying to lose weight, everything you just said, Jen, right?
Yeah.
The undernourished because you've been
Hmm.
stressed all day, your mental energy is at its peak, all of the stuff you just said. And then you get home and well, guess what's a dopamine hit? Sugary treats
Hmm.
that disrupt your chemical like neurons and your hormone fluctuations and all the chemical pet reactions in your body. And so
Yeah.
like the food, that bite, and you can just feel all the stress in your body. That first bite, like you can feel your shoulders lower. You like savor that moment, and then all of a sudden it like sends the chain reaction off in your body, and now next thing you know, you can't control what's going in your mouth, and you're
Yeah.
just like shoveling it in, and
Yeah.
then you feel like crap and you're beating yourself up, and then you wake up the next day and the cycle continues.
Hmm.
And so, like, learning different ways to get that dopamine while also caring for yourself and being intentional throughout the day and present
Yes.
was really big for me.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about it so well about just the intentionality, right? Like especially with listening to your body, because like you've said before, like I mean, just the way we're raised in society, even being in school, and like you could only go to the bathroom at certain times, and like all of this stuff, we just don't listen to ourselves.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like with ADHD, our interoceptive awareness is not as strong as a neurotypical person. So we are more likely to be disconnected from our hunger cues, our satiety cues, our thirst, like all of that stuff, right? So if you like, it is so important to work on awareness around that kind of stuff because that is the way that you're going to, I don't know, kind of smooth it out and like find a way to like listen to your body, start to trust yourself, not look for external sources telling you like you must do this, you must do that, and like kind of get out of those cycles, you know?
Oh my
But it's
God.
hard to develop that awareness,
It's so
right?
hard. I mean, it gets like hindsight's 2020, right?
Oh yeah.
It's it's so easy now. Like I've been working at this since I was 10.
Yeah.
Like before I knew I had ADHD, before I had the binge eating disorder, which turned into orthorexia, which is, if you're not sure, if you're not aware, is a disordered version of healthy. Like your relationship with healthy living is so extreme that it's considered disordered living. So it's
Yeah.
like binge eating, but on the opposite spectrum. Both of them are not
Yep.
good for your body. Um,
100%.
and it took all of that, and it took me learning to say to myself, like, you know what? Everyone else's advice, I don't care if they're experts, it's not working for me. I have to figure this out on my own. And I don't know that I've ever given myself credit for that, Jen. I just had a moment where I was just like, wow, I had two choices
Yeah.
and I never even saw the other one. The first one was one choice was the path I took, which is
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out, which means I'm going to have to start listening and paying attention to what's going on to see what works for me. But the other path that I could have taken, which I think a lot of people take, is well, fuck it. Like,
Yep.
it's not working. This is the way it is. Why did I think it could be different? And just sit in that suffering. But now that I've done the work, I'm able to help other people navigate it because I've lived it.
Yeah.
Someone
You
posted about that.
should like recognize that for yourself because that is huge. And it's so like sometimes people will have glimmers of it, but like what do you think? Like how did you do that? Let's hear about how you did that because no, for real, it is
Let me
amazing.
take that for a second. I don't know that
Yeah,
I've ever given myself credit for that because it's
it's
just the
pretty
way it
amazing.
was. Like
Yeah.
failure just wasn't an option. Like,
Yeah.
um, so I was in my 20s and like I had been dieting since I was 10 and I was gaining weight while I was actively trying to lose weight after college and a lot of life events in there. And one of the first big milestones for me was my best friend from college got married and we were watching the wedding video back. And I was sitting there, I'm like, who is that? They're wearing a bridesmaid's dress. I was the maid of honor. I've never met this human. It was me.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was me. I didn't recognize myself. And the only reason I knew it was me was I guess I had turned to the camera and I caught a glimpse of my eyes and I was like, those are my eyes. And then all of a sudden I was just like, is that what the 213 pounds that I currently weigh look like? That's not a healthy person. I'm not going to make it to 30. And something in that moment clicked. And all of a sudden, some of the uphill battles I had, started, I like checked them at the door. Like the mental piece of it clicked in. But it really wasn't until like fast forward a whole bunch of crap and a whole lot of weight loss, weight gain cycles. And it really wasn't until I started living one step at a time that I learned the most important piece of my health journey, which was I could not be truly healthy unless my health, my relationships, and the way I earn money were in some sort of harmony because I was really good at one of those at the time, but I hadn't figured out how to bring them all together until I took a sabbatical from work, a forced sabbatical from work from having a panic attack. And I realized that what I was doing while I was healthy, the shell of me looked really healthy and people praised me
Mhm.
for it, that I wasn't healthy because I was had this unhealthy relationship with healthy living. And that I wasn't allowing the way I earn money I wasn't listening to the red flags. I was ignoring them. I kept telling myself I was wrong. And that was starting to cause me to slip into old habits of using food to cope, to soothe my nervous system. And so it was that part of the hey, fireworks. It was really that part of the journey of me then navigating, okay, how do I take care of my body? How do I have a better relationship with food without relying on trackers and color coded containers and macros and
Points.
all this stuff? Like, how do I actually listen to all of these signals that my body keeps throwing up, throwing out, throwing up, throwing out? And then, like, how do I do this in a way that feels really good with the relationships that are important to me? Because sacrificing my family to go do some crazy run or not making time for my friends because I had to work or not going out to eat because I was terrified there wasn't going to be something that fit in my plan. I was like, this is not sustainable. Like
No.
it worked for a season, but like now I'm at a new level and like I got to figure out how to make this sustainable. And
And
so
that's not living either, right? Like
uh,
that's not living.
no,
I'm just kind of blown away. Like it like it's kind of amazing to me that you can like figure all that stuff out because I so much of it like we think of it so compartmentalized, right? But you're exactly right that like healthy is a holistic thing and I don't mean that like, you know, crazy granola crunchy like whatever you want to call it. I
isn't it
mean
funny that
like
we associate
yeah,
holistic, us being a
yeah.
whole being, with labels like crunchy and
I
hippie
know.
and like
Which I hate that, but
isn't
it's
that interesting?
yeah, I know it
Because I do
is.
it
So it's
too.
like I even want to say that in like, you know, when I talk about things, but then I'm like, oh, people are gonna think I mean this, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate. But it is, it's all of those things. Like I my training is through precision nutrition and they talk a lot about like the all of the different components of health, which is just it's not just what you're eating and the exercise or movement that you're participating in. It's like your relationships, it's your yeah, your social life, it's your existential life. Like there's so many components to it. And you're right. Like it's your financial, like your career, all of it. But like you can't be like it's just like you were saying, like if you could be like to the from the outside look like the picture of health, but it
But what does
there
it
has to be
matter
that
when
balance.
nothing else in your life is working?
Exactly. What is the
Just like,
point?
and how can you, if your body can't do the things that you enjoy doing, if you can't ride the roller coasters, if you can't keep up with your kids and your friends, and you can't go do the things, or you feel like you need to hide out in society, like then are you really living? Just like if you have all the money because you focused on the career, but you didn't figure out how to incorporate your healthy body, how do you have the energy to not bite your husband's head off when you get home? How do you have the energy to regulate yourself when your kids are trying to navigate new big emotions? Like you
Mm-hmm.
can't. And so like
Mm-hmm.
every piece of it fits in like a puzzle piece to the
Yeah.
others. And when you figure out how to make that harmony work for yourself, because it's different for everyone, everyone
Yes.
needs different things, all of a sudden you're like, I'm a whole person. I could do anything. My
Yeah.
body is amazing. And you start listening to all those little cues that you were numb to before because everyone told you you were wrong. All of a sudden you're like, I am unstoppable.
I'm so, like smiling so hard. So like this is exactly like oh my gosh, I just want people to feel this so badly. Like and not think especially for women that are struggling with their anybody who's struggling with their weight that just like when they look at the external stuff and they think, well, I guess I just have to do it this way and they're told that's the way you do it and then it doesn't work for them or they just like internalize it and like think that there's something wrong with them and then they can't make it happen. So then they go down this cycle of like, not only did I not get anywhere, but now I feel like so bad about myself and I'm judging myself so hard and I can't do anything.
Hmm.
Like,
And there's different levels. And I don't know if you
yeah,
experienced this too, but there's different levels. Like
yeah,
there are times when just even keel, not really pushing hard on anything in particular, like just status quo baseline living. And then
yeah,
there's other times where I'm like, I'm kind of bored with baseline. Like I want to go.
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
go after something. And sometimes that's like I want to like right now. So I've run, I don't know if you know this, I've run over 250 miles through Disney World. So I've run a lot in my life and
yeah,
I'm not a run, I kind of fell out of it. And so
yeah.
there's the piece of my ego that says like you should be running half marathons. And then there's the
Mm,
other piece of me who's just like, I want to enjoy the journey of getting my miles back. And I have now a speed goal that I'd like, not because speed matters, but because I want to challenge myself to get back to something that like I can do. Like it's a challenge. It's going to be hard. I'm going to have to pay attention and actually show up and do it. And that makes me feel alive.
well,
I'm
and
ready.
like those, I was just gonna say quickly too, like those ebbs and flows, like you talked about, like that's what I want. Like it took a long time for me to learn to trust those like because you think, oh, I'm supposed to be like this every day. I must eat this amount of calories, and every day I must exert myself this way and do this and do that. But like our bodies don't operate that way, right? They
Especially
kind of
not as
ebb and
women.
flow. Yes, and they ebb and flow. And learning to listen to yourself well enough to be able to trust that with your hunger too, like that can, there's some days where you want to eat a lot more. There's other days I'm not that hungry. And I think of that with my kids when they were little, and I'd be like stressing because it's like, oh, they must eat all of this certain stuff every day. But some days they like the pediatrician would call it like jags. Like there's some days where they eat so much, and then other days where they barely eat, and that's normal. It's
Yes.
totally normal. But we don't listen to it. We just think like, nope, we got to do it this way.
We got to
And
do it
so
this
I
way
love
because in
that.
20 minutes they're going to tell me they're hungry and I can't handle that.
Yeah,
Like I'm
yeah,
not going to be able to cope if they tell me they're hungry in 20 minutes.
yeah. So like just listening to those ebbs and flows in your body, and your what you desire to do and what fuels you and what like brings you comfort and contentment and stuff. Ugh, it's amazing.
Yeah. Jen, I want to know, like, what are some of your when you look back about
Hmm.
where you've been and where you are now and what you
Yeah,
believe now,
yeah.
what's like one of the biggest, like one of those milestone moments, pivotal moments that that's like jumping out of like, that was one of those turning point moments, whether I knew it then or not. Like, what were one of those for you?
Okay, the first thing that comes to mind, this is This is so random. It feels random, but I'm just thinking, I was like, I'm just going to go with it. It's the first thing that came to mind. I was in my kitchen folding I don't know why I was folding laundry in my kitchen, but I was. And this was like, what year was this? Probably, I don't know, 2014 or something. Anyways, maybe 2016. And I heard a podcast, and it was like a life coach, and they were just talking about, like thoughts and feelings creating your actions. And they kind of tied it into food. And at first I was like, what the hell what does this have to do with anything? And I just remember thinking about it for a long time afterwards. And I was like, I just had never, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but I had never made that connection that there was really anything, because like we separated so much. And so that was a pivotal moment for me, because it really got the wheels turning, in that like my emotions might be driving a lot of this struggle that I'm having, because I wasn't diagnosed at that point with ADHD, but I have struggled with my weight since I was about 13. And it's same with you, where it's gone like both ends of the spectrum, from like very disordered eating where I was severely underweight to like I've just gone back and forth, back and forth. And that moment really just kind of just changed everything for me, because I realized there was this connection. And then I was like very curious and started doing a lot of reading and listening to different people, just to not to like have them tell me what to do or whatever, but just to like, I don't know, think about things differently. So that was huge for me.
You just said something. You just said not to. I was started listening. I got curious and I started listening to like all these podcasts and these people talk, not to, for them to tell me what to do,
Mm-hmm.
but so that I could hear. It was basically what you were saying was so that I could hear different trains of thoughts that I had, different train of thought, different information presented in a new way, things maybe I haven't thought of before, so that I can then incorporate what works for me
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
doesn't. And that's
Yes.
the key to
It
life.
is. It is. And especially with people with ADHD, like we are always looking externally, like, tell me what to do, even though we like, another paradox, we hate being told what to do, and yet we're looking for somebody to tell us what to do.
We hate
And
structure but need structure
yes,
at the same
exactly.
time.
And so we're so like sort of like susceptible, I guess would be the word, to just like, that's why we fall into like these diets and programs and protocols and stuff, because we think like, well, I don't trust myself enough to like, I don't know. So somebody else tell me what to do. And I just like, that was so pivotal for me, because like realizing that like what I actually thought and felt like mattered in the outcome, um was sort of, I guess, part of me realizing like it's actually not going to work if somebody else just tells me what to do. It just doesn't work. And so
Yeah.
it's just as much an exercise in learning to listen to yourself, listen to your intuition and all that, but also like from there learning to trust yourself and acknowledge like, hey, I'm like, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to do things perfectly, but I know what's right for me and I know how to do things, and I can like allow myself to be in like maybe the discomfort of change, and I'm going to be okay, you know?
You just ruffled some feathers and I loved it because people don't want to think about the discomfort of change being the thing that brings you what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we know what it is that we want, we're not doing it because somebody told us to do it.
It's
We're
not a
doing it
punishment.
because, yeah, it's not a punishment. It's like you know, like picturing your future self who's done all these things or accomplished these things or living a certain way. And you're like, you know what, I'm going to put this discomfort is just like a little deposit into the bank of like future me or something like that.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than like, I'm going to restrict myself so hard because somebody said I had to lose weight.
Until I break, and then I'm going to like consume everything that I told myself I couldn't have. And then I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna live on the sabotage cycle, that roller coaster ride
Yeah.
forever.
I want to just stand on the side of that roller coaster with my hand out and be like, come on, come here. Just come here. Come
Come,
here. You can get off.
ride. I got
Stop
you.
for a
Come,
sec.
come, come to this other side. But
Yes,
you know,
trust me.
it's so I'm loving this conversation so much. I told you before we started that this podcast is so therapeutic for me as well
Mhm.
because it helps me see things that I never in my own self that I never paused to notice or
Yeah.
never realized were milestones. So it makes me better at my job, in the way I serve the world, but also just those little feathers in my own cap of reminding myself
Yeah.
how freaking amazing I am and all of the
Hmm.
hard things I've overcome and that hard shouldn't be avoided.
Yes.
It's hard with no end in sight where you feel like you are just getting tossed and turned by life that we
Yeah.
want to like avoid.
Uh-huh.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Oh
And
yeah, I totally do.
one of the things that I was just thinking about was like I had a really hard time with the transition of like learning something new and thinking this was like the end all be all because it was what I needed to learn in that moment. And then getting to the end of that season of life and wanting to do something differently or learning a new piece of information that may have contradicted the previous thing I was doing
Mhm.
and reconciling that.
Mhm.
And I just want to share a little bit about that. And then I want to hear your take on this. So, if you're in a season where you'll just learn a new piece of information and that was the answer that you needed right now to go on the next part of your journey, to like accomplish your next goal, to evolve in a new way. When you get to the end of that chapter,
Mhm.
you might feel stale and bored and like it's not enough. Or you might learn a new piece of information that might be different than the way you've lived your life the last 90 days. And it's okay. It's okay
Mhm.
to evolve and to change and to do things differently with new information from a new lens, from a new experience. Like that concept boggled my brain because I thought I was a hypocrite. When in
Yeah.
reality, like I had to go through the other season with the other set of rules and
Mhm.
guidelines to even be open to this new set of guidelines and information to be relevant for me to actually like do something with it.
Yeah.
Did you ever experience that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can think of a couple of examples, but this is just so funny that you mentioned this because my husband and I were just having this conversation yesterday because I'm dealing with something with somebody who is very stubborn, set in their ways, and wouldn't admit that they had, you know, done something that had, I don't know, it's a whole long story. But we were just talking about how being able to acknowledge when maybe you didn't make the right decision or change your mind about something, or you get, just like you were saying, you get new info and you
Info.
realize, like, oh, let's do it differently going forward, is such a sign of growth. And like, just such a good quality to have as a person, right? Because we're always doing the best we can with the info that we have. Like the first thing that came to mind when you said that was like um intermittent fasting. I don't know why, but like that for a long time, like people would say, like, oh, it's so great, it's so healthy. Little do we know that like none of this testing was ever done on women. So it's totally different for us. But I would try that stuff now and then and kind of white knuckled my way through it. And you think you're doing the right thing. And then afterwards you realize, like, actually didn't feel really good when I did this, you know, but then I kind of realized, so then I felt bad because then I realized like this maybe wasn't good for me. And I told other people I was doing this and all this, right? But I actually realized from that um it wasn't the actual intermittent fasting itself, but like when I would do like, maybe not eat after dinner was actually like really helpful for me because then I would sleep better. So it wasn't actual intermittent fasting itself that was like beneficial and amazing and making me feel great. It was just that I wasn't like eating a bunch of food before I went to bed. So like it's okay to like move on and change your ways, but it's also like good to incorporate your own experiences and knowledge into things. And I don't know. That was kind of like a rambling
No, I love that.
explanation, but
And I think
yeah.
you shared a really key lesson in this sustainable, healthy living journey and like movement that you and I are both very passionate about,
Mhm.
which is it's try things But don't just try things blindly, pay attention and learn from them. So you were collecting data and then you were learning what was or wasn't working for you. And then you use that information to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's a good thing. You learn from it. It's not like, oh darn, I shouldn't have done that. Like, nope, you learn from it. I don't know, because you cut out, I couldn't
ADHD
hear you.
brain. ADHD brain's just totally spaced. Oh, we were talking about like the data because
Yeah.
like the reason intermittent fasting doesn't work for majority of people is because they are following it because they think that that's what's going to make them lose weight. They're following it because someone
Yeah.
told them that that would be best for them
Mhm.
rather than learning how to learn what different food groups do for their body so that when they
Mhm.
were feeling tired and reaching for the Snickers bar, they would know that their body wanted carbohydrates to help with energy so they could make a better choice for them in that moment. Um, but it's learning what's working for you because there are days now where I used to be an avid like if you don't eat breakfast you are setting yourself up for failure. But there's days now where like I am ready to eat at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
and there are other days where it's like 12 o'clock and I haven't eaten all morning and it wasn't because I was too busy to eat,
Mhm.
which that happens a lot in like very high profile people who work 40 hours a week for a company in high stress situations when there's meeting.
Yeah.
But it was just because my body wasn't hungry and I didn't want to force it to do something that it didn't need in that moment.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And those intentions, while it may be the same as intermittent fasting or following, like a timed nutrition with if you're like really trying to dial in your fitness and nutrition at the same time for an outcome,
Mhm.
maybe the same actions, but the intention behind it was 100% driven from my own body and me
Yep.
paying attention, which makes a world of difference in the results in the
Mhm.
outcome.
Yeah. And like it's funny that you talk about breakfast because that's exactly what I was thinking of as another example of this because um I kind of like when I started thinking more from the frame of mind of like just listen to your body cues, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're satisfied, which I still believe is like the best way to live. But I didn't know that I was still kind of like ADHD. My ADHD was like affecting that stuff, and so I would have that typical day that a lot of people will experience with or without ADHD. But like you wake up, you drink coffee, and then that kind of gets rid of your hunger without really realizing it, and then you wait and you don't eat breakfast because you got involved in something else, and then all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock and you're like ravenous, right? And so I would say, like, well, I can't force myself to eat breakfast because that's going against my whole principle of like only eat when you're hungry and stop when you're satisfied. But like recognizing that, like, sometimes putting in different parameters so that you can guide yourself in the right direction is okay. And so
Mhm.
ever since I started, you know, trying to maybe eat on a bit more of a schedule just to kind of acknowledge like I might not remember to do this and that's okay. So I'm just gonna, cue myself up to like if it's 9 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet, I should probably grab something. And it has been infinitely better for me since I started doing that. So that is a great example of like you're listening to yourself, but you're also like kind of parenting yourself. I don't know what the word is, but like
Mhm.
so I'm still listening to my body cues and always tapping into them and learning, to follow them, but also like taking care of myself in the ways that maybe I lack a little bit in the way that my, working memory operates or something.
I love that. I love that you shared that because something else that I didn't share that I think is important is that when those days go by, when I am not hungry until 11 o'clock, I also pause and reflect on have I been working out consistently and like
Mhm.
lifting weights consistently? How's my sleep been? Am I eating really late at night? What if I am, what am I eating late at night? Because all of that stuff contributes to whether you're hungry or not
Yeah.
and your adrenaline levels and your cortisol levels and things like that. And the same with when I wake up starving, I ask myself the same questions. Are you hungry or are you anxious about the day? Are you hungry or are you bored? Are you hungry because Like, did you work out really hard yesterday? Okay, we're gonna need to go make sure we have a good chunk of protein in this breakfast, or you're
Mhm.
gonna eat yourself out of house and home. And so,
Yeah,
like, it's so many layers, which I
it
think
is.
exhausts people and it overwhelms them.
Yeah,
When you learn how to do it over time and it's coming from within, it's a part of your autopilot. It's not a checklist anymore.
yeah, totally. And like not I think that's what can also set people back with ADHD too, because we get so like overwhelmed so easily when there's lots of pieces of information and we're like, I don't know where to start. Okay, I'm gonna do nothing.
Yep.
Um, but like that's the ADHD
I'm just gonna
paralysis. Yeah,
sink to this couch with
yeah.
my little Nintendo Switch and just not be seen for a month. It's fine.
I'll just disappear. It's good. Um, but like, and it's so it's hard because it's also like kind of boring to say we're going to work on these little habits at first and establish these things, and then like you said, layer in and layer in and layer in. But for a lot of people, it can be like, well, that's like boring and not exciting. And like, where's my immediate weight loss? And where's the fun in that? And where's my charts and graphs? And yeah, so it's hard to say like these boring things are really going
Because
to
it's
help
not
you.
sexy.
It's not sexy. It is 0% sexy. And
There's
so,
no quick wins.
no. And like, that's why it's like really good to like set small goals, celebrate all the wins, as small as they might be, because that's the kind of stuff that's going to keep you going through the times when you're like, I'm seeing nothing from this, even though it's really the building blocks for all of that change. So, yes, there's so many things to consider, right?
So many things to consider. And I think the best reward out of all of it is that I can ask my niece is 7 months old. And as she grows older and she's with me, I can ask her really smart questions about her hunger and how her tummy feels. And like, I get to, because I did the work now, I really hope that she doesn't have the disordered relationship with food that I did. And because I can teach her better because of the words that I'm using. It's not because I'm telling her that veggies are good. It's because I'm showing her that
Yeah.
that's how Aunt Tiff eats, and that when
Yeah.
Aunt Tiff does this, Aunt Tiff feels good. And we don't have to talk about our pant sizes. You know what I mean? Like, we're not eating veggies because we want to be a size 6. We're eating
Yeah.
veggies because it makes our bodies feel really good and it makes our brains work better. And when we have avocados, we feel really smart and our train of thought is linear rather than all over the place. Like, but that's the stuff that I think is the most rewarding out of
Mhm.
all of it, is that future generations get to experience different because we're learning to do different.
So much. And my kids are 7, 9, and 11. And it has been like, that's one thing that's been hard, when we talked about like, you didn't do things properly before and you change how you do it. I feel like I don't know if I did right by them at the beginning. There's been times when I've really struggled with my own like body image and how I was eating and all of that stuff. And I'm like, oh, I hope it didn't impact them. But the best I can do is going forward, everything like example for them, trying to teach them the value in the nutrients, and not like in a scientific way, but like, oh, this is the kind of stuff that's going to give you so much energy. So when you want to go play basketball later, you're going to feel awesome, or that kind of stuff, as opposed to you must eat this and you must eat that, and like finish your vegetables before you get up from the table. It doesn't motivate them, and so we're just trying to do the best we can.
I love that. So, Jen, what would be like your first 3 steps
Hmm.
or 3 tips for someone with ADHD to tackle first if they're
Hmm.
looking to get control of their health and
Hmm.
maybe their waistline,
Hmm.
if they're carrying some extra weight around?
Hmm.
Like, what would be your first 3 places for them to start?
Yeah. So the first thing, kind of just learning to observe yourself. And for some, everybody's different with that. For some people, it can be, I'm just going to write down at the end of the day, I'm going to write down like what I ate and when, not to like count calories or anything like that, but just to understand what are the kind of like habits that I'm doing, or what are the things that like, am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I just operate on a clock, or did something happen that stressed me out? So like just observing yourself and kind of taking note of that in whatever way makes sense to you so that you can start to just develop that awareness muscle around yourself and what are your habits and what maybe like are the emotions that are driving things, because that's another thing that I always tell people is like journaling is super helpful, but most people are like, ew, I don't want to do that. So I wouldn't say start there, but yes, just like so observing yourself in whatever way is works for you. um oh, where else would we start? Like I always work with people with figuring out a way to plan that works for them, because sometimes we're making choices that we don't feel great about just because we're not prepared ahead of time. And I'm
Mm.
not talking about like doing like some crazy Sunday food prep or anything like that, but just find a way to be like, okay, how can I make sure I have like the foods that I want and that I'll actually eat in my house? Again, you do it in whatever way makes sense to you. And then maybe the third thing would be to find some way to move your body that you love. Just like you were saying this morning, just like, or this afternoon about like, you're not moving your body to lose weight, but what a difference it makes in your brain chemistry, in your stress levels, like your nervous system, so many things. Like movement just does so many things to us, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be like 5 minutes of a workout video. It doesn't matter. Just find something that you actually like and you'll actually do, and you'll be amazed at what a difference it makes on how you think, how you feel, how you sleep, all of this stuff. Yeah.
So good. Oh,
Yeah.
I have loved this conversation
Me
so much.
too.
I am so grateful that you wanted to be on the show because
Yeah.
this was so good. This is, if you guys are wondering how like my conversations in real life go, like this is it. This is how I talk. This is how I interact with my friends. This is the stuff we talk about. And so like welcome to the inside. Um,
Yeah. And I
Jen,
was thinking, I wish I lived near you so we could be friends in real life.
we can have coffee dates. It's cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, how do people connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm at jenniferwatts.ca. I have a website too, but I'm like, I wouldn't bother with that. But well, I guess you could. It's jenniferwattscoaching.com.
Well, when you sell it like that,
Yeah,
why
I
am I
know.
going?
Like, wow. But through my Instagram or on my website, you can find, I have a free guide that talks about my calm, I call it calm method, like creative planning, awareness, lifestyle, and then movement and mindfulness. Anyways, I have this free guide that talks all about that for weight loss with ADHD. So you can either through my Instagram or on my website, you can grab that a free copy of that. Yeah, just to take a
I'm
look
just
at
gonna
and
grab it. That's awesome.
yeah, find a way to get started. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Oh, so good. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the woman right there who is here with us, has been here for this conversation the whole time. If you love this conversation, be sure to share with a friend who maybe needed us in their ears today and just needed a little friendly conversation for their own journey to know that where they're at and maybe get a little clearer on where they're going. And so, Jen, thanks for being here. And everyone,
Thank
I will see
you.
you next week. That's Two Humans Talking. Bye.